Hi there. My name is Levi, and I'm here today to talk to you about growing your business. Are you thinking about hiring someone, expanding your team? Do you need to outsource some accounting or website help and development? It sounds like you need to hire someone. Growing your team is a natural next step in any business development, but how do you know who you can contract with and who would be considered a covered worker or employee? Both titles come with various responsibilities and duties, especially around workers' compensation. We're going to take the next few minutes to really dive into Washington State's independent contractor versus Washington State employees. In Washington, every worker is presumed to be a covered worker for purposes of workers' compensation coverage, unless they fall into a few narrow exemptions provided by the law. If the person you hire to contract with is a covered worker under Washington state's compensation law, then as an employer, you have certain legal responsibilities, such as keeping accurate records, pay workers' compensation premiums, and follow state employment laws. Simply calling a person an independent contractor does not automatically exempt them from your legal obligation to pay workers' compensation premiums. In some cases, a person may be an independent contractor on one contract, but not another. Each contract must be evaluated separately, and we'll go through a short quiz soon to determine whether you need or have an independent contractor or a covered worker on your hands. Something tricky off the bat is that a person can both be an independent contractor for federal purposes and still be a covered worker for Washington State's workers' compensation purposes. Other government agencies like Washington Employment Security Department or unemployment, the Internal Revenue Service, IRS, which is our federal income tax, they have their own laws and recommendations or regulations when it comes to independent contractors. And this video is meant to be a general guide to help you understand when the Department of Labor and Industries, or L&I for short, applies to workers' compensation laws, independent contractors. I would highly recommend consulting each agency policies as the decisions are often made on a case by case basis. So let's get started. Workers' compensation laws covers both employees and independent contractors who provide essential personal labor. Washington has put together a simple test to determine if your worker is exempt from workers' compensation or if your independent contractor does not pass all of the following questions, then you must provide workers' compensation coverage. First requirement, are they working without your direction or control? Remember, if they are truly independent contractors, you cannot supervise how the work is done. Some indicators that this individual is not working under control include you're not concerned with the manner or technique in the way the job is completed. You don't tell the individual the sequence of steps or follow what method of work to follow. You don't provide training or equipment. You don't contract with multiple individuals, which would require coordination. On the other hand, here are some indicators that individuals that are under your control would be considered a covered worker and would fall under workers' compensation. Individuals works with you or your staff. You don't really have a contract that establishes the independence or the contract provision that represents control. You set hours or you keep a timesheet. You pay the individual on a more frequent cycle than you pay your other creditors. You retain the ability to hire and fire within a contract period for reasons other than breach of contract. If you answered yes to any of these, then your worker is a covered employee. Requirement number two, is the contract worker separate from your own business? Only one of the following three conditions needs to be met. One, Is the individual service outside the usual course of business? Or, in other words, does the contractor do something different than you do? Some examples might be um, hiring a plumber to install plumbing, assuming that general contractors don't have these licenses or regularly offer these services, or restaurant contracts with janitorial companies to clean the restaurant after hours. Next question. Is the individual service being performed outside the place of business? Or, in other words, does the contractor perform the service away from where you perform your services? An example of this would be a antique furniture boutique sending a piece of furniture to be refurnished by a furniture refurnisher at their business location, or an auto repair company to send a car's transmission to be worked on in a transmission shop. Finally, is the individual contractor obligated to pay the costs affiliated with the location from where the work is controlled? In other words, are they responsible for the costs of their own separate business headquarters? Does your individual provide receipts or contracts showing proof of financial obligation of their location? Some examples that meet this part of the test: a painting contractor can have mobile headquarters in its van with client records and items such as a computer, printer, equipment, tools, and inventory, and records showing that it has paying the cost of the van and the contents. Or a lawn service regularly performs administration, marketing, or sales from its home office and has records providing it's paying the cost of its home office if you have your own headquarters. Third requirement. Does the individual have an established business license that exists before you brought them on, or is the individual a principal place of business that qualifies as an IRS tax deduction? They must pass this two subtests. One, do they have evidence to demonstrate that the individual has an established business? For example, advertising, marketing materials, customer lists, memberships in business or professional associations. Things like could not prove this would be a contractor that eliminates the possibility that the individual could suffer a loss, an individual whose business could not continue at the completion of the engagement because they have no other clients. B, does the individual or principal place business that qualifies for the IRS business deduction? And do you have evidence to demonstrate it? Some examples could include a copy of the individual's federal business return showing the deduction. I want to state here that you should make sure that you black out your personal information. Your contract can state the individual has deductible locations and they sign it. The fourth requirement is the business individual responsible for scheduling expenses with the IRS, such as that would be required for a business tax return. For example, does the individual file business tax returns with the IRS, and are they the same business activity you are engaging them for? Examples of evidence could include the individual gives you a copy of their IRS business tax return, or your contract states the individual will file one of the following business tax returns and they sign it: tax form 1120S, 1065, or 1040 Schedule C. Next up, fifth requirement. Does the individual have all signed registration and licenses for their business? Is the business fully licensed? Can you find them on the Department of Revenue? Or do you have access to copies of specialty licenses? The easiest way to check is to ask for a UBI number from the contractor in, and use it to look up the DOR, look up a business tool at dor.wa.gov. Sixth requirement: does the individual maintain their own set of books that records and reflects all items of income and expenses of their business? Some examples of this include invoices from an individual, a copy of IRS tax return, the estimate for the work, profit loss statement. Please note that these are just a few examples of business records. A complete set of business records must be regularly maintained to pass this requirement. This is just in place to ensure that individuals that are actual independent contractors and not merely workers just keep a few spare invoices or gas receipts is not enough. Finally, the seventh requirement, which is just for our construction contractors, is the individual properly registered as a contractor? If the individual properly registers as a contractor, then the individual is probably an independent contractor exempt from workers' compensation. If not properly registered as a contractor, the individual is a covered worker and workers' compensation is required. Remember, all 6 requirements must pass for an individual providing personal labor to be considered exempt from workers' compensation, and all 7 must be met for the construction trades. The bottom line: independent contractors or covered workers, regardless of the coverage requirements, you are required to keep your job site safe for all personnel performing on this location, whether they work for you, your contractor, your subcontractor, or someone else. A definition of an independent contractor differs among Washington State's safety and health concerns, workers' compensation, and wage and hourly laws. Your independent contractor under Washington State's compensation law could be considered an employee for many purposes of safety and health laws. For this reason, Washington safety and health rules may apply at your worksite, even if you're not required to pay workers premium concessions. For this reason, Washington safety and health rules may apply at your worksite, even though you are not required to pay workers' compensation premiums. Even though you may not be technically liable for the safety and health safety even though you may not be technically liable for the safety of some people on your job site because they are not considered employees under safety and health regulations, people like supervisors with their own employees who are doing work that requires a certain license or certification to give them legal permissions to do the job, like an electrician or a plumber, doing work that requires the use of heavy equipment that they own, not rent, at the job site. On the job site, folks who are not making a bulk of their profit from their own personal labor. They might be delivering materials, for example. Still, the best practice is to make sure that your job site is safe for everyone. All right, folks, still have questions? L&I does provide consultations, training, and technical assistance at no cost to employers. You can call today and schedule a free confidential consultation or go to www.lni.gov/safety-consults for more information. Still have questions about what it means to be an independent contractor? For determination of coverage for independent contractors, you can call workers' comp coverage determinations at 360-902-6868 or email to determinations@lniwa.gov. Please note the determinations and conversations are completely risk-free and for education only. They will not lead to an assessment or an audit referral. Think of this as more of a planning tool, something you can use before contracting with a worker to make sure that you are good to go. You can also check out their website at the LNI homepage, www.lni.gov, or schedule a one-on-one with your own business consultants through GSBA's BizTech at biztech@gsba.org. Thanks so much for joining us today, diving into compensation and who's included. Appreciate you taking the time to learn more about your responsibility as an employer. I encourage you to check out GSBA's business library on Google Drive, where you can find videos like this and more information. Until next time, be well.